Well, we're now joined for some analysis by Sami Hamdi, who's the editor-in-chief of The Interest, a United Kingdom-based international magazine. He's a regular commentator on issues in the Middle East, North Africa and Pakistan politics. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you for having me, Peter.
All right, so how did the beloved Imran Khan, who was so popular as the country's captain in cricket, became, in a fairy tale, I guess, president of the country, end up facing terror charges?
I think that the reality is that since Imran Khan came to power, he has essentially, came to power, very popular prime minister. The COVID pandemic hit, there was a bit of economic problems. But what we also saw was that Imran Khan was trying to put his imprint on the government and ended up clashing with the army when he decided to try to put in his own choice for a successor to the army chief of staff. And the army chief of staff essentially was very upset about this, and there was a reported feud between Imran Khan and the army chief of staff, who was supposed to retire within a year. And within this backdrop, we saw this parliamentary vote that ousted him come about. It was against this backdrop that we saw this sudden acceleration in the politics that saw his coalition partners suddenly turn on him. Imran Khan accused them of having taken bribes in exchange for abandoning his coalition, which meant that he lost his parliamentary majority. And this enabled the opposition to unify all together in order to try to vote to oust Imran Khan. The reason why the opposition was able to unify to oust Imran Khan was because Imran Khan was about to pass, or rather he already passed one of them, but passed two laws that the opposition felt would cement Imran Khan's premiership over at least the next decade. And these two laws were, the first was to allow Pakistanis abroad to vote, and according to the polls, more than 90% of Pakistanis abroad are in favor of Imran Khan. And the second was electronic voting, that Imran Khan claimed would stop the vote rigging taking place in certain provinces and also encourage the youth to vote. The opposition believed that if it was made easier for the youth to vote, then they are also likely to vote for Imran Khan and the PTI. In other words, the army and the opposition both felt that Imran Khan's power was becoming stronger and that he was essentially beginning to impose measures that would help to entrench that power that he had secured democratically via elections. Imran Khan's compromise to the army and the opposition was that early elections should be held, in that given that there is this political feud, let the people decide, let's go to elections. But this current government that Imran Khan likes to call an imported government, imported a reference to the idea that because he was pursuing an independent foreign policy, the US were upset and therefore supported his overthrow. Again, no evidence has been presented about this, but nevertheless, this current government is unwilling to hold early elections, primarily because they are only united in their hatred for Imran Khan and fear that if they go to elections, then Imran Khan will be the beneficiary. And this is why the focus has been on reversing the law that allows Pakistanis abroad to vote. They have removed that right of Pakistanis abroad to vote, essentially sending a message that keep sending your money and pay your taxes, but we are not having the right to vote in this country if you don't live in it, and also removing the electronic voting. The problem for the government and the army, however, is that in the provincial elections, in the by-elections, such as that in the largest province of Punjab, Imran Khan is pulling off spectacular landslide. In Punjab, where the current prime minister is from, Punjab is considered the current prime minister's stronghold. It's considered something that is his own backyard. Imran Khan's party won a landslide in that backyard. It overturned the traditional political dynamics and then proceeded to win two more by-elections with very large margins. And this has now caused jitters amongst the army and amongst the prime minister, the current government. The idea being that Imran Khan's rallies are only continuing to get bigger. He's continuing to win these provincial elections. And the closer we get to the appointment appointed date of general elections, there are genuine concerns that there could genuinely be a political earthquake, that Imran Khan might actually win an outright majority and come to dominate democratically and electorally, breaking the traditional centers of power. And it's in this context that we see this accusation of Imran Khan being accused on anti-terrorism charges. We've seen the government, or rather the army or security forces. Imran Khan doesn't like to call out the army. He refers to them as neutral. But we've seen recently a crackdown on Imran Khan's supporters in the media. We saw this morning a video went viral of a journalist who is supportive of Imran Khan, sympathetic to Imran Khan. He produced a video while on a plane claiming that his plane was being diverted to Islamabad. He was arrested when he landed, and then later on when he was released, he released another video saying he had been tortured and that he had been beaten. And this is the context in which Imran Khan came out and made the statements that he's being charged for, the statements that the head of the police of Islamabad and some of members of the judiciary must be investigated for torture, must be investigated for the way that they handled the arrest, must be investigated as to why they ordered the arrest of a journalist. And in response, the judiciary has announced, or rather this investigation has been announced into Imran Khan on anti-terrorism charges. Imran Khan hasn't been arrested yet. He's on what's called a pre-trial bail, which is a process in which the investigation is allowed to happen. But nevertheless, this is seen as the latest bid by the government and by the army to try to quash this irresistible momentum of Imran Khan that continues to see thousands of people take to the streets, that continues to see his party win these landslide victories, and a genuine concern that what they've done to Imran Khan is, rather than oust him from the political scene, the very action of ousting him from the political scene has made him this behemoth of a power that is suddenly hanging over them. And now the question is whether elections will be held in this circumstance if it's believed that Imran Khan will win the landslide.
And I was just about to ask that, actually, that are they not inadvertently making him a martyr that will be supported even more? But let's chat a little bit about these charges being proffered. The authorities, whose bidding are they doing? Is the army picking up the phone and telling the authorities, go and press these charges, and telling judiciary to investigate?
I think the difficulty here is with regards to the opaque nature with which Pakistan operates. It's true that the army have significant influence. They dominate foreign policy. When Imran Khan won the premiership, when he won the elections and became prime minister, there were many reports that suggested that the reason he had won was because he had come to an arrangement or an agreement with the army. Whether this is true or not is irrelevant. What is relevant is that the army is seen indeed to have a big sway in politics. But what is more important, however, is that the army is always keen to ensure that it is perceived as neutral. The army doesn't like to get its hands dirty in politics. It doesn't like to be seen to be supporting a particular party over another. And equally, Imran Khan is keen to stress that his opposition is not to the army, it's rather against the opposition parties, against this current government that is in power, against Shahbaz Sharif and these other powers. And I think those sensitivities, the army seeking to portray itself as neutral and Imran Khan seeking not to target the army directly in his accusations, I think reflects the power dynamics in Pakistan insofar as the army's role and hand in things that are taking place. It's unclear whether the army has a role in this. It's unclear whether even the government has a role in this. But rather what is significant is that the anti-terrorism charges are not proportionate to the crime that Imran Khan is accused of making. It's to make a statement demanding an investigation into the arrest of a journalist does not warrant anti-terrorism charges. It's a very reasonable demand to make. And I think what we're seeing here perhaps is, even if the army have not ordered this particular investigation, certainly someone in power, whether that's the government or the chief of staff of the army, someone in power feels very threatened by Imran Khan, feels very threatened by his momentum, feels very threatened by the large gatherings, feels very threatened by the landslide victories being achieved in the provincial elections. And this is rather the latest attempt now to try to quash his supporters. We also saw an announcement being made that Imran Khan's allies are not allowed now to be broadcast on satellite television in Pakistan, another bid to ensure that Imran Khan's message doesn't reach the Pakistanis. It's in this context that this accusation is being seen as being politicized, as being driven by a hidden hand. What the hidden hand is, nobody is certain, but what is absolutely clear is there is a bid to silence Imran Khan as the momentum grows. Whether they succeed or not is a different issue, but what we are certainly witnessing is the greatest challenge to the current political status quo in Pakistan, and Imran Khan is channeling that.